And so I started building very basic websites for local radio and TV stations. In fact, some of them here in Detroit. So if anyone listens to Channel 955 or WNIC, back in 1997, when they wanted someone to build some basic HTML and JavaScript, they called up yours truly to build that out for them. That then parlayed into deregulation with the FCC, where those individual stations were owned by conglomerates. I worked for a company that's now known as iHeartRadio, and then was recruited away to Viacom because they had just merged with CBS and were trying to inject some youth into their digital strategy. And if you know anything about Viacom, their headquarters is right in Times Square. And at the time, the hottest TV show on cable was Total Request Live, hosted by Mr. Carson Daly. And so they had all these nerds, myself included, that needed a home in this really fancy tower, and they didn't really know where to put us digital folks. But the story about that 1515 Broadway building is that on the third floor where Total Request Live's windows opened up, it used to be the storage room for a shoe store that was there before Viacom built that office. And the back of the studio space was basically a garage. And so they stuffed all of us nerds on folding tables in that garage for a while. And then at a certain point, they're like, you probably need some quiet spaces for an office. This guy Carson hosts this show, but he kind of needs some space too, but you guys don't need it at the same time. So why don't you go and share a room with him? And so I did. And I have lots of really cool photos of boy bands and Christina Aguilera and a bunch of other things who were not coming to see me. They were coming to see Carson, but we had to share a desk for a couple hours a day. And that's the story behind the story. But good morning to you all. It's great to be here. I figured there's no better way to get nerdy with numbers than when you're not fully caffeinated yet in the morning and bring some research here about the creator economy. But I'm really happy to be with this group and share with you a little bit about what's happening across influencer marketing and content marketing and what we're seeing here at IZEA. For those of you that aren't familiar with us, it is true, we did start the modern influencer industry in 2006 on MySpace and LiveJournal. But today, we do this for Fortune 1000 brands and larger around the world through a combination of enterprise software and services. And while the company is headquartered in Florida, I actually live here local in Milford. So I've done the extreme commute for the last 11 years. I joined IZEA in late 2011. And with the pandemic, it has me here in the Motor City a little bit more than I used to be. So it worked out great to be with you all this morning. And if you're not familiar with what we're talking about when I say the word or phrase influencer marketing or influencer collabs, it's this confluence of so many very exciting things. It's this idea of content creation, storytelling that Matt was talking about, but of course modernized across all of the major platforms that each of us use every single day. And it's not just any longer attractive women making duck faces on various platforms. It's far more sophisticated than that. It's far more diverse than that. And frankly, far more democratized than it's ever been before. And so the purpose of today's session is really to give you some of the data behind this ecosystem. It's very easy to say, all right, well, I get it. It's creators on one side, it's marketers on the other, and we're compensating these individuals to create content. Simple enough, and there's great data that comes from that. But I think the why is equally important because most cocktail conversations that I'll have when I tell someone what I do for a living will be, oh, so you're the people that pay, Charles Leclerc $2 million to do a post on Instagram during Formula One weekends. That's what influencer marketing is, right? And the answer is yes, but influencer marketing is also leveraging micro and nano influencers, for example, to create content at incredible scale and paying those individuals perhaps $50 or $100 or $500, which is very different than hiring a celebrity, an athlete, or a web celebrity. So the data that I brought today really encompasses what we call the state of the creator economy. And a shameless plug, if you are a research nerd like I am, we try to be a good standard bearer for our industry and conduct these studies throughout the year. And they're available for free at IZEA.com. I cherry-picked 3 today that I thought would be very topical. One that's really talking about the viewpoint of consumers themselves. And why is it that they're trusting the creator economy as a means of advertising? What are they seeing? How does that break down demographically when we think about gender or ages? Where are those platforms the most innate for those audiences? And then we're going to turn it around and we're going to look at it from the creator's perspective. What are they earning right now? Not everyone is an F1 driver earning $2 million a post. Let me tell you that right now. But there's also a misconception of the value chain, and getting to the heart of where that money is being made and what it looks like from the creator's perspective, I think will really help the marketers here in the room. And then lastly, we'll have some time to talk about bringing more equity to the equation. Simply put, beyond it being perhaps a celebrity mechanism only, perhaps a decade ago, the other problem with influencer marketing was that it was not particularly diverse, and it was definitely not equitable in terms of the investments being made in the space. But the great news is that's changed dramatically, and I want to share some information that we have that we're seeing as we look at breakdowns from ethnicity, gender, and even age. Does that sound good? Great. Well, since we're a nice intimate group this morning, and hello to everyone on the web, if you have any questions as we go along, just shout my name, say, hey, you, whatever you like, and I'll happily tackle it. It's the great thing about having a more intimate crowd. So let's talk about consumers first. We sampled a representative size of the US that was statistically relevant, 1,237 social media users, to understand the kinds of data that I'm going to share with you. And the first thing that is the material question for a lot of our clients is, what is the number one way? What's the top way to be able to get people to try my new product, my new service? And how do you contrast that to other forms of mainstream marketing and advertising? And we were really surprised to see a couple of things about this. I broke down the chart by gender, as well as a composite of all adults over the age of 18. Influencer posts in 2022 ranked as the number one way to get consumers to consider something new. And that actually, for the very first time, surpassed television ads. And you're saying, television ads? I thought that those were dead. I thought that social media put TV out of business. Time over time again, if you really look into the industry research, and this is not just brought to you by NBC Universal or Viacom, TV is not dead. In fact, it's actually seen a resurgence in the last 5 years where it consistently ranks in the top 3 performance mechanisms. People who are programmatic hardos would say, oh, banner ads, native ads, that's the way to make this stuff happen. I'll tell you what, I haven't seen a single study, ours included, where paid social or programmatic banners crack the top 2 at all. And yet, when you look at the investment levels here in the United States alone, those are still multi-billion-dollar categories. So you have to ask yourself as a marketer, why is that? And I think a large part of it is the safety blanket effect that we all sort of succumb to in different parts of our lives. No different than perhaps 50 years ago when it was really easy to sell an old white guy CEO on why he needs an expensive TV spot. The expensive TV spot of 50 years ago has become the black box programmatic buy of 2022. So you're going to see a couple of different trends throughout today's research, which is the differences between how people who identify as men and people who identify as women look at the creator economy and respond to influencer marketing. You're also going to take note of that contrast of those same identification types when we flip the tables and look at the influencers themselves. Let's talk about age. because age really matters. And I have to tell you, as a guy who is starting to cross different thresholds of these brackets, the ages really do start to matter for those of us. Not so surprisingly, that if you were to take a generalization, magazine still works on really old people. If you're over the age of 60, you definitely want to be buying a magazine. That is still very much effective for that age bracket. But you'll also note that we're not losing out here in a variety of different areas. Not surprisingly, influencer marketing does very well, 18 to 44. It also does fairly well comparatively to TV and paid social, 45 to 60. There's an entire conversation we could have separately if you have target consumer audiences that are over the age of 60, and actually the resurgence of all things digital in recent years. One of the key gateways to all of these, whether it's influencer marketing, paid social, or even banner ads, is actually the adoption of the iPad for individuals over the age of 60. It is their #1 preferred device. And next time you're on a flight, I actually flew back from Colorado the day before last for a family wedding. And I was looking at this research, and I was looking at the gatehouse when I was waiting to board my Delta flight back to Detroit. The number of people who I would maybe generalize as being over the age of 60 carrying their iPads through the terminal was highly notable. So the next time you're in one of those public places, take a look around and think about how does that inform your strategy. And I say that not only as an influencer marketer, but a marketer's marketer, right? The experiences that we design for people that are older are oftentimes the same ones that we design for people who are younger, even though the form factor is wildly different, right? A mobile browser on the iPhone is of completely different size, of course, than a full-fledged Safari browser on an iPad. That's my, elderly PSA of the day today. Let's talk about, these breakdowns and really drilling into audiences that are what advertisers say is where they make money, 18 to 44. There's 3 things I want to call your attention to here. The pink bars are influencer posts. The blue bars are TV commercials. And the darker purple that you're seeing on the far right of each age group are all other forms of paid social ad. I'm curious, have any of you as consumers, even though I know you're all marketers, intentionally clicked on a programmatic social ad in the last year? Yeah? Okay. What was it for? Do you remember? I'm putting you on the spot.
No, you're fine. I clicked on a paid ad. I'm getting married in October.
Okay, yeah.
Some pretty earrings. And I was like, where are these from?
That's perfect.
And now they want me to buy everything that they've ever.
They're retarding you to hell. Yeah, now you're like, I never want to own those earrings ever again.
Yes, no, I never want to see them again. They are super cute, so I still might buy them.
I admit, like, I am a junkie for the direct-to-consumer, like athleisure wear companies that come up, like being a ginger, a little sensitive-skinned. So if there's like a really cool bamboo tee that seems cost-effective, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. There was a stat, though, that I thought was particularly compelling, and maybe you and I should play the lottery, because the real-world stat from a numbers perspective is that, not to sound overly morbid, but you have a better chance of driving to Metro, hopping on the plane, that plane crashing, and you surviving than intentionally clicking on a paid social ad this year. So numerically, it's not great odds. So you start to ask yourself, as an attention economy, what are we really trying to do here, right? Is the idea to have top-of-mind awareness or purchase, right? You didn't buy those earrings, right? There you go. So the real path to purchase also becomes a big driver in this conversation. And we look at influencer marketing as the glue, the connective tissue in between a lot of these things. Because in a perfect world, perhaps, you would have seen someone on Instagram talking about how she styled them for her wedding, right? And there would have been opportunities maybe in an Insta story to go to a shopping experience, certainly a retargeting jump off. The combination of those things, the repurposing of that person's story really changes the game, because what we've also seen is that they're actually, while the plane crash scenario is not a great one numerically, you can actually bolster the odds by using influencer content and doing the paid programmatic stuff in the name of the influencer, and it ups those odds 8 to 10 times that someone will actually do something. Yes?
So within that social ad strategy,
Yeah.
are they all equal, or is like Instagram a better place to place? Are you going to get to that?
I will get to that, but I'll give you the cliff notes. If you are over the age of 44, Facebook is the most effective place. Facebook, not Meta. I have to clarify here in 2022. They've confused us forever. Instagram does better directionally under the age of 44. What is going to be interesting is how much information TikTok chooses to reveal or not about the efficacy of their platform. I have a thesis right now that while it's a white hot platform, almost every campaign that we've done this year involves TikTok in some way, shape, or form. They have a major issue that's looming on the horizon that will be addressed this year supposedly, which is the lack of age verification. There is a tremendous amount of volume or assumed volume on TikTok that happens with minors. And those minors right now are basically checking a box that just says, oh, I'm an adult. And right now, TikTok is reporting that as, oh, everyone is at least 18 or older on this platform. And you can only imagine what the problems are going to be with that. Yes, please.
So we are B2B business.
Yeah.
So do you think that LinkedIn is a good place for it?
I think LinkedIn is a fantastic medium. The challenge right now with LinkedIn, as I'm sure you know, is that it's extremely expensive to buy. And the platform is doing a lot more to embrace non-written word content. The improvements have all been really on video and photo for the last 18 to 24 months, and I think that they're doing a decent job with that. The problem is when you're restricting that content into a walled garden and it doesn't get picked up from an SEO perspective, what does that do to your efficiency as a creator, and what does that do for your efficiency as a buyer on the other side?
I'm a buyer and a marketer, and I'm enjoying my data. So I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think about, we can get into a whole series of conversations here, this is great. What do you think about when you see a creator promoting something on LinkedIn? Is that different? Does it break the clutter? Because it can look organic. Okay. We're seeing an uptick directionally about 15% more activity in the creator economy on LinkedIn this year than we did last year at the same time. And it's only June. Great questions, thank you. What's your business?
Manufacturer, AOD pumps, air operated double diaphragm pumps. Super sexy.
Very sexy. Hey, we need those pumps though.
I know.
She said double diaphragm.
Not just single
Double.
Gotta move those liquids.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this idea of celebritydom. Who's everyone's favorite celebrity in the room? I mentioned an F1 driver before, but you can come on and say. I guessed it was a cow in his Alkay line. So Johnny Depp. Wow, hot take this week. Hot take. Anybody else? Come on.
I mean, I love Halsey.
You're a Halsey fan. She's great.
You love Halsey?
She was on SNL a couple weeks ago. I watched her. Yeah, she was great.
She's my girl. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Anybody else? Bill Murray. Not on social, though. It's unfortunate. So we did the very first, I think, publicized celebrity sponsorship on Twitter. It was a little-known person that you might be familiar with called Kim Kardashian. And Kim, in 2008, was best known at that time as Paris Hilton's personal assistant. And she was approached by our client, Armani, to promote a new pair of stretchy jeans that they had. How much do you think Kim got paid in 2008 to do that sponsored Twitter post? It's a fun fact. I'll give you a hint. It was under 5 digits. Any guesses? $850 and a pair of jeans was the price for Kim to take a picture, post them on Twitter. It's still there today if you do a quick search. But today, of course, as we know, thanks to Kris Jenner's hard work, the Kardashian clan is earning far more than $850. One of the interesting things, though, is that when we start to parse out the creator economy and we talk about the sum of the parts, it's very quickly to go down the path of thinking about it in the means of traditional celebrity sponsorship. Even in B2B, what big conference have you gone to that hasn't involved some sort of fancy keynote speaker, whether they're a former politician or a former maybe C or D-list celebrity to give you the morning pump-up speech? All of that has always been a part of our ecosystem. One of the things that I think has been the most interesting to track and see is when you talk about trust and what that means to consumers. Over the last 10 years, we have seen the yellow bar, which is the trust in A-list celebrities, think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or what have you, it start to invert with social media influencers. And our thesis behind this is pretty straightforward. It's in one part that people feel close to the people who aren't necessarily truly famous, meaning not on television, not in movies, not on the field or on the rink. And they also have an interesting ability to have a two-way dialogue with those individuals. If you think about your favorite person that you follow on TikTok or on Insta, they respond to your comments sometimes. Or how cool does it feel when you're, I'm into this guy right now, Eggs Malone on Instagram. I don't know if anyone follows him, but Eggs' thing is he takes wacky reels of people dancing and puts like old school hip hop tracks as a over on top of them. And he has a really robust personality, and he will always comment back if you give him like a funny comment. And it's become like an entire thing about his mantra is like, what is he going to say in a response? Now, that's just one example, but that interactivity is so different. And you start to see this really penetrate all age groups. And what really opened my eyes, again, talking about age, is that this was unaffected by people who are older versus younger. And you start to wonder, well, who are the types of people that follow and or engage, or both, over the age of 45? And you start to see, as we pull up the platforms here shortly, why it is, I think, that trust has been built and why it's so actionable as a currency for adults of all ages. Let's talk about purchase. And I realize that we have a mix of both B2C and B2B marketers here in the room today. But at the end of the day, while there's preference, perhaps, to certain mediums, it really matters what they end up buying or they don't. And we're starting to see not only tremendous results in those core age groups that we've featured before, but the elongation of those age groups is starting to become more persistent in the purchase patterns regardless of age. This is also really interesting. The amount of deal flow in the creator economy when we get to the equity portion of today's talk does heavily skew to women. Men only get about 17% of the $22 billion globally that flows into influencer marketing payments. However, when you start to look at the results of have you purchased a product after seeing it promoted by an influencer, you're actually seeing tremendous equity in the response rate of both men and women alike. On a basis points perspective, men are actually accelerating the most in terms of purchase pattern after exposure. Women are staying relatively consistent to slightly up over the last 5 years that we've been doing this work. And then let's talk about engagement. And it means a lot of things to a lot of people. If you're in the world of the Elon Musk hate crew, engagement means all the bots pressing the love button on Twitter all day long for you. But in our world, we look at it for the totality of all platforms. We're currently doing executions on 14 different platforms, whether it's TikTok and Insta or Twitch and Discord and everything in between. And the age group participation, you're talking about nearly 2/3 of all adults saying that they've actually engaged with an influencer post over the last year. It does trail off slightly with older adults, but again, strong consistency with the largest growth rate, about 8 basis points year over year alone in 45 to 60-year-olds. I think that has a lot to do, of course, with what we've been going through the last year. When we're all sitting on our couch and we're multi-devicing in the evenings, it probably increases the likelihood of engagement as opposed to just browsing. Fun fact, I saw something that was released by Apple yesterday. They had WWDC yesterday afternoon. Did anyone catch the stat of how many feet per day the average adult scrolls? It's a great stat. It was the equivalency of the height of the Statue of Liberty, 302 feet per day on average. And so, a big notion is the future of what we would consider today a mobile device may actually get rid of the need of our thumb to move, because physical therapists will tell you the number one incident that they're seeing after ACL and MCLs is sprained thumb muscles. This is also a fun stat. How many influencers do you follow? Of course, this is there's a lot of influencers out there. We have about 17 million in our platform. The sweet spot seems to be somewhere less than 20 or so. And I think that seems about right. I don't know about you, but being a guy who's in the biz and in theory should be following a lot of people, I do for a while, and then I decide to just pull them off my feed for a bit. And we're starting to see a couple of different trends. The first one being that younger individuals have an extremely high favorability arc, meaning when they follow someone, they follow them hard, and then the disinterest arc is equally as steep. People who are slightly older tend to follow slightly less people, but their loyalty is way longer. So those patterns continue to persist, and they have over the last 5 years. Oh, this is fun. We asked consumers, what do you think is the best platform to actually target someone on if you're trying to promote a new product? And here's where the data gets really funny really fast. I think we as marketers have maybe an unconscious bias towards shiny coins, right? The newest platforms, I want to plow it all into LinkedIn, or I want to plow it all into TikTok, when in reality, what consumers will tell you is that YouTube and Facebook are the undisputed kings of where they think product promotion happens. And actually, I will tell you, I think YouTube continues to be the unsung hero of the creator economy. And here's why. 3-part thesis. Part number 1, most mainstream creators publish on an average of 3 different platforms. One of them, almost consistently, is YouTube. Why is that? It's not because adults have great attention spans. We have miserable attention spans. But we do like that storytelling. And the movement of YouTube as being one of the only platforms other than Twitch that is readily available on every smart TV has transcended it as a medium. My children, who are 9 and 12, when they go downstairs and pop on the TV after school, they're not watching Comcast. They're opening up the YouTube app or the Twitch app. That's where they get all of their content from. So if you think about the combination, again, of what we've been going through as a society the last 3 years, it's no surprise that consumers are saying, gosh, YouTube is the place. It's also the number 3 search engine, right, in the world. And in fact, if Bing continues to decay a little bit here in 2022, it's very possible that on this trend pattern, by the start of 2024, YouTube will be the number 2 search engine in the world, which is why, of course, the EU and even the United States are worried about deregulating the whole thing and trying to figure out if we should separate YouTube from Google search. So again, what I would advise everyone to think about is this information really tells us a narrative that what we think of as marketers, or where we even think of as reading all the trade mags and seeing where things are going, that's not always in alignment with what consumers are telling us themselves. I wrote this same data down. That last stat was all adults. This is by gender. If you are trying to reach men, far and away, you should be looking at YouTube really hard, really hard. And in fact, Facebook, even though it's seen as being sort of de rigueur, is still very much in the conversation. For the B2B folks in the room, the largest growth category in Facebook globally is not B2C, it's B2B and B2 channel. It's an interesting nuance to all of this. TikTok, I will say on the far end, I put it here in black so it's easy to see, is continuing to grow dramatically. So where women, we're saying here, women adults, that they think TikTok is the #4 vehicle, and about 16% of them express that as being the place they'd put their money. That number was 5% just 3 years ago. So we're continuing to see just the evolution of that space all the way around. Of course, please.
If you go back to that slide.
Yes.
Your headline, take off the word influencer. Are those numbers still good?
Great question. We did not ask that. So I can't tell you definitively. However, I would tell you anecdotally that in general, the one place where there is a little bit of a gap is that specifically for men on Discord and Twitch, those index a little bit better. Welcome. Just making sure we're doing well on time, because I appreciate all the questions. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
What do you say to the response to the pieces that have come out about the algorithm for TikTok and how it's promoting just people doing stupid stuff and dances here?
Yeah.
But in China, it's promoting science and discovery and mathematics and things like that. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I would give it to you in a few parts. I think there's the brush that you have to paint with on TikTok, which is that inherently there's a lot of politics involved with the stress between our country and a few other democratized countries around the world, and what ByteDance is choosing to do in those countries versus what they do in mainland China. And I am not a politician, so I won't exactly wade into those waters, other than to say, I don't think that TikTok and ByteDance are looking at specifically the United States in the same way as they are other countries around the world, and their strategy is very different here. That then plays into the regulatory stuff that I was mentioning before, which is I think that in this space and time, they are taking full advantage of something that other platforms have actively worked to prevent, which is unabashedly marketing to minors. And that's a real challenge in this country. It's a real challenge in the EU. And the people who are responsible for regulating that are very actively looking to do so as we speak. I think that then plays into your question about why does the algorithm show what it shows? And if I had to guess, I think a big part of TikTok's growth has been people who are highly receptive to dances and stupid clips. And the algorithm doesn't understand age necessarily. It's been taught not to. And so it's simply feeding the vast majority of their users what those users are looking for. That's my hunch. Matt, do we have till 11:20? Is that what we have? I want to make sure that we're on time. So the great thing is we've been talking about all this data. The bad thing is I have a lot more to show you that we won't have time for today. So again, the shameless plug is it's all available online, and there's far more eloquent voiceover people that do this besides myself. So please go ahead and digest it. Out of curiosity, are people more interested in understanding a little bit more about the equity side of influencer marketing with the 5 minutes we have left? Do you think so, Matt? Give that a shot. We'll jump there really quick. Let me exit out of this, and then I'll skip over to those slides. However, I just hit escape and this weird thing started loading, so let's see if I can make this work right for everybody. So let's talk a little bit about what we saw from an equity perspective. Some of the data that I'll show to you today, and a lot of it you can pull down if you're interested, really started to understand a big question that came about in 2020, which was the role of people of color in the creator economy. And again, if you had to sort of stereotype what was happening in influencer marketing directionally, most people would tell you that the posts that do well lean towards beauty and fashion, promoted by a Caucasian woman under the age of 40. That is really, if you had to personify what influencer marketing did best. And we sought to go and look at that and understand it from a couple of different lenses, but starting where the rubber hit the road, which was the money, right? What were people earning on a cost per post basis? Because while you can't necessarily change participation and make people want to create content and distribute it to their followers, you can encourage them substantially by making sure that the pay that they're receiving for that sponsorship is as good, if not better, than the peer set that they're trying to work with. Did I break it?
It's all good.
Oh, good, I'm glad.
Just gotta skip through to where you're.
Oh, I just have to skip through it? Okay, I'll do that really quick. So the net of this, knowing that we have 5 minutes left, and I'll try to talk while pressing this button 1,000 times, is the idea of looking at this in ideally race, language of communication, gender, and age, and doing that via platform. And we've been benchmarking this now, we call it the state of influencer equity for the last 5 years. And so it gives us a great arc of what that looks like for each of those different areas. And of course, don't get me wrong, equity runs far deeper than just gender and race and language and things. We also think that there's a growing interest in creators that identify as being disabled in a variety of ways. And we're trying to capture those points of data as well. And that has a lot of ramifications, not only for the creators themselves, but also for marketers, because I don't know about you, but most people are trying to be as inclusive as possible, no matter if you're trying to reach consumers or business professionals. So with the remaining couple of minutes left, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of this. This is kind of an eye chart, but it takes and looks at 7 years of data that we have. This is about $600 million of deal flow that went through during that time, and looks at the average cost per post paid across all social platforms and broken down into 5 major race identification groups. What you're going to see here is that from 2020 to 2021, the largest area of increase by 88 basis points was for individuals who identified as Asian. But you're actually seeing all non-Caucasian race groups growing dramatically, and on a basis point calculation, if I'm doing that right, it's somewhere just about 1,200 basis points from 2015 through 2021. I then compared that in the pie chart to the actual demographics from the US Census for those exact same gender types. One of the other things was talking about deal flow overall. So when you look at the deal flow to influencers who identified as being white, that has actually slipped below, for the very first time, those that actually identify as Caucasian or white in the US Census in 2021. So we're headed in the right direction. As you look at the progress of the purple portion of these pie charts year over year, you're starting to understand that deal flow is representing more of who we are as a nation in terms of actual population. This is a really interesting stat. I looked at it from a language perspective, talking about who, from different tiers of languages is earning the most on average on a cost per post basis based on the primary language that they speak. Arabic speakers, many of whom are actually right here in the Motor City, are actually earning the most on an average basis cost per post in 2021, followed by those that speak Mandarin, those that speak German, and those that speak Japanese. Let's talk about gender equity for a minute. So men earn more than women in influencer marketing. And for the girls in the room, you're probably like, oh, fuck the patriarchy, like, come on, seriously. This is genuine supply and demand economics, because the amount of deal flow that goes to men is so small, and the amount of male identifying influencers is roughly 1/7 the size of those that identify as women. The price premium is actually issued for a reason that is not just the patriarchy this time around. But you're also still seeing the gaps narrowing as both grow. Look at the progression from 2019 through 2021. The girls in the room and in my ecosystem are continuing to see wonderful compounding 15 to 20% basis point gains. Men just happen to be following those patterns as well. However, the percentage of increase is actually lessening year over year. A couple other things. I broke these down by different types of platforms for you as well. One of the things is that where women do very, very well is Insta Stories. And in fact, the difference is about 1.6 times better than men. Why do you think that is? Any guesses? Women are way better storytellers. Way better storytellers. Way better content creators. I would tell you anecdotally that the work that we do for brands, we have to go back and provide notes to influencers. I would bet my firstborn that if we have a problem on storytelling, it's a dude on the other side of the phone that we're having to coach on, hey, how about you don't sound like a caveman today, and maybe tell that story a little bit better. So the point is, there is just this incredible body of knowledge that I would welcome each of you to keep on looking into. And for those of you that either are making investments right now in the creator economy or are contemplating doing so, please use this stuff as a resource. We do this for the broader advertising community, and we continue to push it forward because we think that knowledgeable marketers make better marketers. And if I can be a resource to it all, I'm at Ryan Schram at Twitter. I am not a bot. I am a real person. And you can hit me up on LinkedIn as well. Thanks for having me this morning.